Trump wins by double digits, wins big with Republican voters. What is your takeaway this morning in terms of if you're the Trump campaign, where this thing stands?
Well, if I'm the Trump campaign, I'm feeling really, really good about where things stand. As you know, in a contested primary, this is the first time since 1976 that somebody has won both Iowa and New Hampshire. And, just like circumstances could not possibly have been better for Ron DeSantis in Iowa, it is never going to get better in any state moving forward for Nikki Haley than it just was in New Hampshire. I mean, she had the support of the incumbent governor. She had a primary system which allowed Democrats to switch parties up to a certain point to go vote in the Republican primary. You had a outsized number of undeclared voters who could also go vote in the Republican primary, and a very moderate to, I'd say, center-left electorate in New Hampshire. And with all of that, Trump still won by double digits. I think around 11 or 12 points is where it's going to settle out. I think that's a massive victory for him. I think you could make the argument that it's a bigger victory and a bigger thrashing than he put on Ron DeSantis in Iowa, all things considered, what was going on in New Hampshire. I just don't see, people talk about the path forward, which is a phrase that I think is overused, but I just don't think one exists for Nikki Haley or for anybody else. This was always Donald Trump's nomination, and now we're just seeing proof of it.
There's a lot I want to break into because I think your path forward comment is spot on. And that's what and there's so many ways I want to go with that. So I'll start with this because I thought it was interesting. Yesterday on the show, we had Tyler Bauer, the national committee man to the RNC from Arizona. And I asked him, how's the RNC going to react to all this if Trump wins the second one? And because there's going to be a lot of pressure to make him the presumptive nominee, so they consolidate resources, start raising more money, et cetera. And sure enough, Ronna McDaniel comes out. Let me play you the clip of her and what she says.
Looking at the math and the path going forward, and I don't see it for Nikki Haley. We need to unite around our eventual nominee, which is going to be Donald Trump. And we need to make sure we beat Joe Biden.
So that's her. I mean, just think about it. She's saying, and I got to be honest with you, Ashok, you say, she literally says, to your point, the path forward, I don't see it for Nikki Haley. That's her exact quote. She ran a great campaign, blah, blah, blah. You just heard the clip. But I got to be honest with you, pleasantly surprised to see that happen. And I think she sees the writing on the wall in a lot of ways, right? She needs the money. She needs the party to coalesce. And I think going into an RNC meeting in a couple of weeks in Vegas, they know that like we need to keep the party together.
Yeah, and I think that's right. And as chairwoman of the party, I think it's in her interest to try to get things consolidated as quickly as possible so that the main opponent, who we assume is going to be Joe Biden, can be dealt with beginning right away. And you're talking about resources here. I think Nikki Haley is getting a lot of her resources from a lot of Democrat donors and a lot of moderate donors who may or may not ever support President Trump. But the fact is, if the longer this goes on, the longer President Trump's campaign is going to have to be expending its own resources. And every dollar spent fighting Nikki Haley because she won't admit that she can't possibly win is a dollar that they can't spend running against Joe Biden in the fall. And so I think it's in everyone's interest on the Republican side to get it finally nailed down to one candidate running against one candidate. And everyone knows that barring some sort of existential thing that pops up, President Trump is going to be running. It's going to be a rematch of 2020. So let's get on with it. I think that is the overwhelming view. And look, I think it was always going to be insurmountable for any candidate who was not Donald Trump. A super majority of Republican voters want him to be president again. No one was ever going to chip away at that. That's just how it is. So let's move on.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's the thing that I found interesting. Let me ask you this tactically. I thought it was actually, I will give her credit for this. She came out, the polls, all of the polls closed at 8, and I don't know what the exact time was, like 8:20 or whatever. The big cities, well, for New Hampshire, Concord, Manchester, Nashua, are coming in, which are going to favor her. They're the Boston suburbs where a lot of those independents and Democrats had voted. The race was as narrow as it was going to be, and she ran out and spoke. And I thought to myself, okay, I will give her credit because the media is going to say, wow, she's actually doing better because I kept telling people this, trust me, Trump support is further out. It's more rural, more northern, more western. It's going to take a little while longer to get those results in. So she capitalized on the moment, got out, said, oh, look at how close it is. I'm headed to South Carolina. Tactically speaking, just as a professional, do you give her any credit for that move?
Yeah, I think so. I was surprised that she came out as early as she did, but you could kind of read the mood on Twitter if you're looking at Journo Twitter, when it was a little bit tighter than people thought at the very beginning when those urban votes were coming in. Journo Twitter was a little bit giddy. We're like, oh boy, Nikki's doing really well. This is not going to be a huge banner night for Trump, and you could sense the sort of the upbeat, optimistic mood among the journalists who were tweeting about it. And I think that's the moment, roughly about the time where Nikki Haley said, I better get out there because it's never going to get better. But that's kind of a microcosm of the whole thing, though, isn't it? New Hampshire as a state, there's no other state that's going to be as good as that. She'll never have a moment where she could get as close to Trump as she did last night. And within that evening, she picked the time where the numbers were as tight as they were ever going to get. She knew it was going to widen out at that point. So yeah, give her credit for that. She's moving on to South Carolina and she's skipping the caucuses in Nevada.
But don't you think? Yeah. Again, we keep every time you say, I'm like, okay, 10 more questions here. But the thing that was interesting to me is I two things. One, I said this early in the night. We had a live stream going as results were coming in, that I thought it was I thought this was an opportunity for her when she got smoked, which is what she did, that she could take that one moment that she's going to have all this immediate attention and kind of do the right thing, what Vivek did in Iowa, and say, you know what, with all these eyes on you, because that's the number one, that's the biggest attention moment that you're going to get. And instead, it was very telling. She's like, I'm going to make this about me and I'm going to try to pretend that I can play on, which is just upsetting people more and more. And frankly, clearly upset President Trump. Tactically, you could hear he said, I normally didn't want to come out here, but, she tried to take a victory lap. And that was the thing, is I felt like she was pulling the wool over everyone's eyes by saying we did really well. It's like, dude, you got crushed in Iowa. You put all of your chips into New Hampshire. You had the current governor. You had General Bolduc out there campaigning with her. And Sununu had said she's going to win, she's going to win, she's going to win. And then she takes this double-digit spanking and claims a victory lap.
This race is far from over. There are dozens of states left to go. And the next one is my sweet state of South Carolina.
It's a little bit strange to watch her deliver two victory speeches when she finished third and a distant second both times. It's kind of funny. And, a mutual friend of ours, Hogan Gidley, said that he's from South Carolina. He said, she might move on to South Carolina and just campaign for a couple of weeks and see how it goes. But if it gets close to Election Day, which is almost a month from now, and she's still down by 30, 35, or 40 points like she is right now, she might hang it up before that election rolls around. But right now, she might go down there, test the waters, see if there's any possibility of a little bit of a bump. And if there's not, maybe then she'll begin to save face. But she is not in saving face mode yet, that's for sure.
I feel like, and I agree, I think that that's actually what she's going to do. But I feel like, I don't know, maybe I just gave her team more credit than that. You actually have 30 days between now and then. And I feel like she had X amount of gas in the car and she's just going to let it stall out, which is an embarrassing way to end, because at some point, all of these elected officials, all of these leaders in South Carolina who know her the best. I mean, heck, she appointed Tim Scott to the Senate. She was friends with Nancy Mace. They've all said, nope, we're going with Trump. And I just, to your point, do you really want to get spanked in your home state where you're governor twice?
Yeah, I think if it comes down to that, if that election is getting close and she's still down by 30 points in the polling average, I think she'll probably have a serious conversation about getting out before that would occur, because it would be really historically embarrassing to act like you are in this race and then go home to what should be the friendliest terrain that you could possibly find and get royally smoked again, worse than in the other two states. I think any politician who's thinking would want to try to avoid that. So we'll see. We'll see.